This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Brooks Jensen, Anacortes, Washington. Master and Man by Leo Tolstoy. Section 4. The homestead where Vasily had pulled up was one of the richest in the village, for the family held no less than 5 lots of land, as well as rented some, while in the stables stood 6 horses, 3 cows, 2 draft bullocks, and a flock of 20 sheep. In all, there lived around the courtyard of the homestead 22 souls, namely 4 married sons, 6 grandchildren, of whom 1, Petrushka, was married, 2 great-grandchildren, 3 orphans, and 4 daughters-in-law with their children. In addition to these, there were 2 sons employed as water-carriers in Moscow, while a third was in the army. At the present moment there were at home only the old man, his wife, the second of the married sons, the elder of the 2 sons who worked at Moscow, come over for the festival, and the various wives and children and a neighboring gossip. It was one of those rare households which are still to be found undivided, yet one in which there were already at work those deep-rooted and internal dissensions which generally originate among the women of a family, and which would break up this family also in time. Over the table in the hut there hung a shaded lamp, throwing a clear light upon the crockery below, upon a bottle of vodka, and upon sundry viands, as well as over the clay walls of the room. In one corner, the corner beautiful, there hung some icons, with pictures on either side of them. In the place of honour at the table sat Vasily, stripped now to his black under-jacket, and chewing his frozen moustache as he gazed round the hut and at those about him with his prominent, hawk-like eyes. Next to him sat the bald, white-bearded head of the family, dressed in a white shirt of home manufacture, while further on were the son who had come over from Moscow for the festival, straight-backed, square-shouldered, and wearing a similar shirt to his father's, but of finer material. A second square-shouldered son, the eldest of those living at home, and lastly the neighbour, a red-haired, lanky muzhik. These muzhiks had had their supper and vodka and were just about to drink tea when the travellers arrived. Consequently, the samovar on the floor by the stove was already boiling. Near the stove also and in the shelf bunks could be seen various children, while the old woman, her face covered in every direction with fine wrinkles furrowing even her lips, bustled about behind Vasily. As Nikita entered the hut, she was just taking her guest some vodka, which she had poured out into a tumbler of thick glass. " You must not refuse it, Vassili Andreitch," she said. " No, you really must not. You need something to refresh yourself. Drink it down, my dear sir." Nikita found himself greatly excited by the smell of the vodka, especially now that he was so cold and hungry. He knit his brows, and shaking the snow from his hat and khalat, halted for a moment before the icons with his eyes turned away from the company. He crossed himself 3 times and made a genuflection, after which he turned first to his host and saluted him, then to those present at the table, and then to the woman standing by the stove. Finally, with a general greeting of "A Merry Festival to you all," he started to take off his khalat, though still without looking at the table. " But you are frozen all over, my brother," cried the eldest brother as he stared at Nikita's snow-caked eyes, beard, and face. For answer, Nikita divested himself of his khalat, shook it out, and hung it over the stove, after which he at length approached the table. Offered vodka, he had almost taken the glass and tilted the fragrant, shining liquor into his mouth, when he glanced at Vasily and remembered the pawned boots, as well as the cooper and the young son for whom he had promised to buy a horse in the spring. So he ended by declining the vodka with a sigh. " I would rather not drink it, I thank you humbly," he said with knitted brows, and seated himself on a bench by the window. " But why? " asked the eldest brother. " Because I would rather not. I would rather not," Nikita replied without raising his eyes, as he squinted down at his short beard and moustache and thawed the icicles out of them. " It does not suit him," put in Vassili, smacking his lips over a cracknel washed down with the vodka. " Well, give me the teapot, then," said the kindly old woman. " I will get you some tea, for you must be frozen. Why are you so long at the samovar, my good woman? "" It is quite ready," retorted one of the younger ones as she wiped the covered samovar with a napkin. Then, raising it with some difficulty, she came and plumped it down on the table. Meanwhile, Vassili had been relating how he and his companion had missed their way, wandered about, fallen in with the drunken muzhiks, and twice returned to the village. His hosts marvelled at the story, and then went on to explain how and where they had gone wrong, who the drunken muzhiks had been, and the route which Vassili and Nikita must take when they set off again. " Why, even a child could find the way as far as Moltchanovka," said the neighbour. " And once there you will only have to hit the turning near the village. You'll see a copse there. To think that you never got so far! "" But hadn't you better stay the night here? " put in the old woman persuasively. " The women shall get you a bed ready." " Yes, do so, for if you were to get lost again it might be a terrible business," added her husband. " No, no, really I cannot, my good friend," replied Vassili. " Business is business. Delay an hour and you lose a year," he added, remembering the timber and the rival buyers who might forestall him. " Shall we go now? " This last to Nikita. Nikita returned no answer for a moment, and seemed absorbed in the task of thawing out his beard and moustache. At length he muttered gruffly, " It would hardly do to get lost again, would it? " As a matter of fact, he was gruff because he wanted the vodka so badly, and the only thing which would assuage that yearning of his was tea, which he had not yet been offered. " But we need only to reach that turning," protested Vassili, " and we simply can't lose our way afterwards. From there onwards it will be all forest road." " Well, it is for you to say, Vassili Andreitch," said Nikita as he took a tumbler of the tea now proffered him. " If we must go, we must, that's all." " Drink up the tea, then, and quick march! " Nikita said no more, although he shook his head disapprovingly, but poured the tea out carefully into the saucer and began to warm his work-swollen fingers in the steam. Then, having bitten off a crumb from his lump of sugar, he bowed to his hosts, said, "A good health to you all," and poured the grateful liquid down his throat. " If only we had someone to guide us to the turning," sighed Vassili. " That could be managed," said the eldest brother. " Petrushka could harness a horse and go with you as far as that." " Harness up, then, brother, and my best thanks to you," exclaimed Vassili. " And to you also, good sir," said the hospitable old woman. " We have been only too pleased to see you." " Petrushka, off you go and harness the mare," ordered the eldest brother. " Very well," replied Petrushka smilingly as he seized his cap from a peg and departed. Whilst the horses were being got ready, the conversation passed to the subject which had been interrupted when Vassili drove up to the window. It seemed that the old man had been complaining to the neighbour, who was also the local starosta, about his third son, who had sent him no gift for the festival, but had given his wife a French shawl. Here the translator inserts a footnote that a starosta is the village headman. " The young people are getting out of hand nowadays," said the old man. " Indeed they are," agreed the neighbour. " There is no living with them. They are growing much too clever. Look at Demotchkin, who broke his father's arm the other day, all through his being too clever, of course." Nikita kept listening and looking from one to the other of the speakers' faces with an evident desire to join in the conversation, but he was too full of tea to do so, and therefore merely nodded his head approvingly at intervals. He had drunk tumbler after tumbler of tea until he had grown warmer and warmer and more good-humoured. The conversation lasted for quite a long time on this subject, on the evil of dividing up families, and proved too absorbing to be successfully diverted